The Temple Eternal stood at the center of the universe. At least, that is what the ancient races believed. Its black stone walls had watched civilizations rise and fall for 10,000 years. The seers who lived within its halls could see things that others could not. They read the stars like books. They understood the whispers of time itself. For generations, the seers had studied one prophecy above all others. It was carved into the deepest chamber of the temple, written in a language so old that even the immortal Morvathi had forgotten its origins. The words spoke of a great darkness that would return to swallow the light of all living things. But they also spoke of hope. 12 heroes would rise from a world of blue and green. They would carry a fire that could not be extinguished. They would teach the galaxy how to survive. Every spacefaring civilization had read these words. Every one of them believed the prophecies spoke of their own people. The Alari were the most certain. They were beings of pure light, their bodies shimmering like captured starshine. Their cities floated among the clouds of their homeworld, towers of crystal that sang when the wind passed through them. They had mastered technologies that seemed like magic to younger races. Surely, they thought, the heroes would come from their perfect civilization. The Kathrani also believed they were chosen. They were warriors with 4 powerful arms and skin like ancient leather. Their monks trained for hundreds of years, learning to fight with weapons and with their minds. Their temples produced soldiers who could kill with a single touch or heal with a whispered word. How could the prophecy speak of anyone else? Even the Morvathi, the oldest race in the known galaxy, assumed the heroes would be their children. They had lived for millions of years. They had planted the seeds of life on countless worlds. They considered themselves the parents of all civilization. Naturally, they would save it. On this day, representatives from every great civilization had gathered in the Temple Eternal. The chamber was vast, lit by floating orbs of soft light. Hundreds of beings stood in silence, waiting. The eldest seer was about to announce the location of the prophesied world. She was ancient beyond measure. This seer, her body was thin and bent, wrapped in robes that seemed woven from shadow itself. Her eyes had seen stars born and die. Her voice, when she spoke, carried the weight of ages. "The coordinates have been confirmed," she said. The chamber fell completely silent. "The world of blue and green has been found." A holographic display flickered to life above the central platform. It showed a spiral galaxy, then zoomed into an unremarkable arm of that galaxy. It focused on a small yellow star with 8 planets orbiting around it. The display settled on the 3rd planet from that star dot. It was a small world. Blue oceans covered most of its surface. Green and brown landmasses dotted the blue. White clouds swirled across its face. It looked fragile. It looked ordinary. "This cannot be correct," the Alari High Luminary said. Her voice was musical, but confusion sharpened its edges. "This world is primitive. Its inhabitants have barely left their own moon." The Kathrani war speaker pushed forward, his forearms tight with tension. "We have studied this planet. These creatures spend most of their time fighting each other over resources and beliefs. They poison their own air and water. They are children playing with fire. They call themselves humans," another voice added. It belonged to a Morvathi elder, a being whose body was like a great tree given life. "We seeded their world 3 million years ago, but we abandoned the project. They showed too much aggression. Too much chaos." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. The gathered ambassadors looked at each other with expressions of disbelief. Some laughed. Others seemed angry. A few simply stared at the holographic image of Earth, trying to understand. The eldest seer raised one thin hand, and silence returned. "The prophecy does not care for your opinions," she said. Her voice was not unkind, but it allowed no argument. "The stars have spoken. The mathematics are perfect. The heroes will come from this world. From Earth. But why? The High Luminary demanded. What could these humans possibly offer? They have no great technology. They have no ancient wisdom. They live such short lives that they barely have time to learn anything at all. The seer turned her ancient eyes toward the Allori leader. For a long moment, she said nothing. When she finally spoke, her words were slow and careful. Perhaps that is exactly why they were chosen. No one understood what she meant. But no one dared to argue further. The conclave of seers made their decision that day. They would send ships to Earth. They would find 12 humans who matched the criteria laid out in the prophecy. They would bring these humans back and prepare them for the battle to come. Many thought it was a waste of time. The Kethrani war speaker openly called it foolishness. The Allori began making their own preparations, convinced that the seers had made a mistake. The Morvathi simply watched and waited, as they always did. None of them knew what was coming. None of them understood what humans truly were. On Earth, life continued as normal. People went to work and came home. They raised their children and buried their dead. They fought their small wars and dreamed their small dreams. They had no idea that ancient aliens were watching them. They had no idea that the fate of the galaxy would soon rest on their shoulders. In a military base in Nigeria, a woman named Yara Okonkwo was finishing her morning coffee. She was a commander in the peacekeeping forces, respected by her soldiers and feared by her enemies. She had seen terrible things in her 53 years. She had also seen incredible kindness. She believed in humanity, despite all evidence to the contrary. In Seoul, a surgeon named Jin-Soo Park was washing his hands after a 12-hour operation. He had saved 3 lives that day. He would try to save more tomorrow. He asked questions constantly, always looking for better answers. He never accepted that something was impossible. In São Paulo, a teenage girl named Ana Silva was walking home through dangerous streets. She was not afraid. She had learned long ago that fear did not help anyone. Instead, she watched and listened. She understood people in ways that others did not. She could see the pain behind angry eyes and the hope behind desperate actions. In Alabama, a man named Marcus Johnson was kneeling in a small church, praying for guidance. He had spent 12 years in prison for a crime he had committed. He had found faith behind bars and questioned it every day since his release. He understood darkness because he had lived in it. In a small house in Jordan, a grandmother named Fatima Al-Hassan was making dinner for her grandchildren. She had been a fighter once, long ago. She had faced tanks with nothing but courage and stones. Now she was old and tired, but the fire inside her had never gone out. These were the humans the prophecy had chosen. These were the heroes the galaxy had been waiting for. They did not look like much. They did not feel like much. But they carried something inside them that the ancient races had forgotten. They carried hope that refused to die. The ships came without warning. Yara Okonkwo was reviewing reports in her office when the sky outside her window turned silver. She walked to the glass and looked up. A massive vessel hung in the air above the base, blocking out the sun. It made no sound. It cast no shadow. It simply existed there, impossible and real. Her phone rang. Then it rang again. Then every phone in the building started ringing at once. She ignored them all. She had learned long ago to stay calm when the world went crazy. Panic helped no one. The ship remained in the sky for exactly 1 hour. Then a small craft detached from its belly and floated down toward the base. Soldiers ran to their positions. Weapons were raised. Orders were shouted. Yara walked outside and stood alone in the courtyard, watching the craft descend. It landed softly on the grass. A door opened in its side, and something stepped out. The being was tall and thin, wrapped in robes that seemed to shift and move on their own. Its face was hidden beneath a deep hood. When it spoke, its voice seemed to come from everywhere at once. "Commander Yara Okonkwo," it said, "you have been chosen." Similar scenes played out across the planet in Seoul. Jinsu Park was leaving the hospital when a figure appeared in front of him. It was not human. Its body seemed to be made of living crystal, light dancing inside its transparent form. He should have been terrified. Instead, he was fascinated. "What are you?" he asked. "I am a messenger," the crystal being replied. "You have been chosen." Jinsu had 1,000 questions. He always had questions. But something in the being's voice made him hold them back. There would be time for questions later. For now, he simply nodded and followed in Snow Paulo. Ana Silva was sitting on the roof of her building when the ship appeared. She watched it descend without surprise. She had always known something was coming. She had felt it her whole life, a sense that she was waiting for something important. Now it was here. The beings who emerged looked like nothing she had ever seen. They were tall and insect-like, with too many arms and eyes that reflected the city lights. Most people would have screamed. Ana simply smiled. "Hello," she said. "I was wondering when you would come." The beings seemed confused by her calmness, but they recovered quickly and explained why they were there. Ana listened carefully. When they finished, she stood up and brushed off her clothes. "Let me say goodbye to my mother first," she said. "Then I will come with you." Marcus Johnson was in the middle of his evening prayers when the church doors opened. Light poured in, so bright that it hurt to look at. He shielded his eyes and saw shapes moving within the light. For a moment, he thought he was dying. He thought angels had come for him. "Marcus Johnson," a voice said, "you have been chosen." He laughed. It was not a happy sound. "Chosen? Brother, I spent 12 years in prison for putting a man in a wheelchair. I have done things that would make angels weep. You have the wrong person." "We do not," the voice replied. "Your suffering is why you were chosen. Your understanding of darkness makes you valuable." Marcus did not understand, but he had stopped understanding his life years ago. He finished his prayer, stood up, and walked toward the light. Fatima al-Hassan was the last to be contacted. She was washing dishes when her grandson ran into the kitchen, shouting about aliens in the garden. She dried her hands calmly and walked outside. 2 beings stood among her vegetables. They were enormous, like trees that had learned to walk. Their bodies were covered in bark and leaves. Eyes like glowing amber looked down at her. "Fatima al-Hassan," one of them said, "you have been chosen." She put her hands on her hips. "Chosen for what?" "I am 74 years old. I have bad knees and worse eyesight. What could you possibly want with me?" "You have faced death without fear," the being replied. "You have stood against impossible enemies and survived. You have kept hope alive when all seemed lost." Fatima was quiet for a moment. Then she nodded slowly. "Let me pack a bag," she said. "And someone needs to watch the children." Within 1 week, 12 humans had been gathered from around the world. They came from different countries, different backgrounds, different lives. They had nothing in common except that strange quality that the prophecy had identified. That stubborn refusal to give up. They were brought to a station orbiting Earth's moon. From there, they were taken to a massive ship that waited in the darkness between worlds. Inside that ship, they met each other for the first time. The meeting room was designed for beings much larger than humans. The chairs were too tall. The table was too wide. The lighting was too dim. The 12 humans clustered together in one corner, looking at each other with uncertainty. Yara took charge immediately. It was her nature. "I am Commander Yara Okonkwo," she said. "Nigerian Armed Forces." "Who else is military?" A few hands went up. "A former Marine from Japan. A retired firefighter from Canada. A young woman from Israel who had served in her country's defense forces. The others were civilians, doctors, teachers, a musician, a grandmother. "This is insane," someone said. It was the firefighter, a big man with gray hair and kind eyes. "I'm 62 years old. My knees are shot. What am I supposed to do against alien threats?" "I have been asking the same question," Fatima said. She had already found a chair small enough for her and was sitting comfortably. "But here we are." Jinsu stepped forward. "We should gather information before we panic. What exactly are we facing? What are we supposed to do? Who are these beings who brought us here?" "Excellent questions," a new voice said. They all turned. A figure had entered the room without anyone noticing. It was the eldest seer, moving slowly with the weight of her immense age. Behind her came representatives of the great civilizations, an Allery glowing with inner light, a Kathrani warrior with arms crossed, a Morvathi whose body creaked like ancient wood. "I am sure you have many questions," the seer said. "I will answer what I can." For the next several hours, she explained. She told them about the prophecy carved into the temple walls. She told them about the Voidborn, the great darkness that had been sleeping for 10,000 years and was now waking again. She told them about the civilizations that had already fallen, consumed by shadow, their light extinguished forever. The humans listened in silence. Some grew pale. Others clenched their fists. Aina watched the seer's face carefully, seeing things that others missed. "You are not telling us everything," Aina said quietly. The seer turned her ancient eyes toward the young woman. "No," she admitted. "I am not. Why?" "Because some truths are too heavy to carry all at once. You will learn them in time." The Kathrani war speaker made a sound of disgust. "This is foolishness. These creatures are nothing. They are weak, short-lived, and ignorant. The prophecy must be wrong." Marcus stood up slowly. He was not a tall man, but something in the way he moved commanded attention. "You think we are weak because we die quickly? Brother, that is exactly why we are strong. We do not have time to wait for things to get better. We do not have centuries to think about our problems. We have to act. We have to fight. Every single day." The war speaker stared at him. "You speak boldly for a criminal. I speak truly for a man who has nothing left to lose." Yara raised her hand for silence. The room went quiet. Even the ancient beings seemed to recognize her authority. "Enough," she said. "We can argue about whether we are worthy later. Right now, I want to know one thing." She looked directly at the seer. "Can we win?" The seer was silent for a long moment. "I do not know," she finally said. "The prophecy does not promise victory. It promises only that you will change things, that you will teach us something we have forgotten." "What have you forgotten?" The seer smiled. It was a strange expression on her ancient face. "That is what you are here to show us." The Voidborn came from nowhere and everywhere at once. It was not a creature in any way that the humans understood. It was not made of flesh or metal or energy. It was absence given form. It was the space between stars become hungry. When it moved through the galaxy, light itself seemed to dim. When it touched a world, that world simply stopped existing. The humans learned about it through images and recordings. They sat in a darkened room and watched as civilizations died. The first recording showed a Kathrani colony world. It was a planet of warriors, a billion souls who had trained their entire lives for battle. They saw the darkness coming, and they did not run. They formed their battle lines. They activated their weapons. They chanted their war songs. The darkness did not slow down. It did not fight back. It simply rolled over them like a wave over sand. The warriors fired everything they had. The darkness swallowed their shots like a lake swallows stones. It touched their ships, and the ships became empty shells. It touched their soldiers, and the soldiers became nothing at all. The recording ended with static. Silence filled the room. The second recording was worse. It showed an Allery city, one of the floating crystal towers that their civilization was famous for. The tower was beautiful beyond description, filled with light and music and the soft whispers of a million minds connected in harmony. The darkness came from below. It rose from the planet's surface like smoke from a fire. The Allery tried to lift their city higher to escape into space. But the darkness was faster. It wrapped around the tower like a hand closing into a fist. The light inside the crystals flickered. The music stopped. The whispers became screams, and then became silence. When the darkness pulled back, only dust remained. Jinsu was the first to speak. "What is it? Where does it come from?" "We do not know," the Morvathi elder answered. His voice was like leaves rustling in wind. "It has existed as long as the universe itself. Perhaps longer. It sleeps for ages at a time. Then it wakes and it feeds. Feeds on what?" Yara asked. "On light. On life. On connection. It consumes whatever it touches, leaving only cold emptiness behind." Aina leaned forward in her seat. She had been watching the recordings more closely than anyone else. "Play that second one again," she said. "The one with the Allery city." The recording replayed. Aina watched with intense focus. When it ended, she asked for it again. And again. By the fifth viewing, the others were looking at her with confusion. "What are you seeing?" Fatima asked gently. Aina pointed at the screen. "Watch the beginning. Before the darkness touches the city. What does it do first?" The recording played once more. This time, the others watched where Aina pointed. The darkness rose toward the city, but it did not attack immediately. First, it reached out thin tendrils toward the communication arrays on the tower's exterior. The arrays went dark one by one. Only then did the main body of the darkness attack. "It cuts off communication first," Aina said. "Before anything else. It makes them silent." The Morvathi elder tilted his great head. "We had not noticed that pattern." "It is the same in the first recording," Aina continued. "The Kethrani soldiers had communication devices. The darkness targeted those first. It did not care about the weapons. It cared about their ability to talk to each other." Marcus understood immediately. "It is afraid," he said. "Afraid of them connecting." The Kethrani war speaker made a dismissive sound. "The Voidborn fears nothing. It has destroyed civilizations that have stood for 1,000,000 years. It has eaten stars. And yet, it always attacks communication first," Aina said calmly. "Always, in every recording. Why would something that fears nothing care so much about silencing its victims?" No one had an answer. The humans spent the following weeks studying everything known about the Voidborn. There was not much. Most civilizations that encountered it did not survive long enough to send detailed reports. But what little information existed, the humans studied carefully. They learned that the Voidborn moved in patterns that seemed random but were not. It avoided certain regions of space and was drawn to others. Jinsu created mathematical models trying to predict its movement. He failed dozens of times before finding something useful. "It is attracted to connection," he announced one evening. "Large populations, dense communication networks, places where many minds are linked together. Those are the places it attacks first. So it hunts communities," Yara said. "It goes where people are most connected." "Yes, and it leaves isolated places alone." Fatima shook her head slowly. "It stars them out. It destroys the centers of civilization, leaving only scattered survivors. Those survivors cannot rebuild because they cannot communicate. They die alone." The room fell silent. It was a horrible strategy. It was also terribly effective. "We have been fighting it wrong," Aina said suddenly. Everyone turned to look at her. She was standing by a window, staring out at the stars. The great civilizations have been trying to defeat it with weapons, with technology, with force. But you cannot fight absence with presence. You cannot shoot a shadow. Then how do we fight it? The Allery representative asked. There was no mockery in her voice now, only genuine curiosity. Aina turned from the window. Her young face was serious. You do not fight it. You survive it. And you survive by doing the one thing it fears most, which is connecting. Not just through machines and networks, through something deeper, through shared experience, through memory, through hope. She looked at each of the 12 humans in turn. The Voidborn consumes light, but there are kinds of light that cannot be eaten. The light inside a person's heart, the warmth between friends, the love between family. These things are not physical. They cannot be destroyed by physical force. The war speaker laughed. You think love will defeat the Voidborn? This is childish fantasy. Marcus stepped forward. He had been quiet for a long time, thinking. When I was in prison, he said, I spent 2 years in solitary confinement. No human contact. No voices. Nothing but 4 walls and my own thoughts. It almost destroyed me. I started talking to myself just to hear a voice. I started imagining conversations with people I had known. He paused. His hands were shaking slightly. The guards thought they were punishing me. They thought isolation would break me. And it almost did. But you know what saved me? Memory. I remembered my mother's voice singing hymns. I remembered my friends laughing. I remembered every kindness anyone had ever shown me. And I held on to those memories like they were oxygen. He looked at the war speaker directly. The Voidborn is isolation given form. It makes things alone. It cuts them off. But humans are very good at surviving isolation. We have been doing it forever. We remember. We hope. We imagine connections even when we cannot see them. The Allery representative spoke softly. We have always fought the Voidborn by gathering our forces together, by building bigger fleets, by creating stronger weapons. And it destroyed you every time, Aina said, because you gave it exactly what it wanted. Big targets, dense connections for it to consume. What would you suggest instead? Aina smiled. It was a strange smile, both sad and hopeful at once. We do not gather to fight. We gather to share. We do not build weapons. We build memories. We create something that exists inside every heart, something that the Voidborn cannot touch because it has no physical form. The ancient seer had been silent through this entire discussion. Now she spoke, her voice heavy with emotion. The prophecy said you would teach us something we had forgotten. I think I understand now what it meant. What? Aina asked. You have remembered something that we lost long ago. When you live forever, you forget what it means to hold on to each moment. When you can always communicate, you forget the value of true connection. Your species is so young, so brief. You treasure every second because you have so few. She bowed her ancient head toward the 12 humans. Perhaps that is why you were chosen. Not despite your weakness, but because of it. The Voidborn reached the last light station on a day that had no morning. The station orbited a dying star, one of the last in this region of space. Inside its metal walls lived the survivors of 20 fallen civilizations. 3 million souls crowded into spaces designed for 1 million. They had nowhere else to go. The darkness had consumed everything behind them. The 12 humans stood on the command deck, watching the enemy approach on massive display screens. The Voidborn moved slowly, almost lazily. It knew it had won. It knew there was nowhere left to run. All fleets report ready, the Kethrani commander announced. His voice was steady, but his forehands trembled. "We have gathered every remaining warship. 7,000 vessels. It will not be enough," the Allery High luminary said. She stood near the humans, her light flickering with fear. "Nothing we have tried has ever been enough." Yara stepped forward. She was wearing simple clothes, not armor. She carried no weapons. She looked at the screen showing the approaching darkness, and she did not look afraid. "We are not going to fight it," she said. "Not with ships. Not with weapons." The commander turned to her. "Then what do we do? Stand here and die?" "We stand here and live. As long as we can. As loudly as we can." Jinsu moved to a control panel. He had spent the last 3 weeks modifying the station's communication systems, with help from engineers of every surviving race. What he had built was not a weapon. It was a network. "The system is ready," he reported. "Every ship, every station, every personal communicator in this fleet is now linked. 3 million souls connected." The Allery commander looked confused. "What good is communication? We can already talk to each other." Aina smiled. "We are not going to talk. We are going to share." She pressed a button, and the network came alive. At first, nothing seemed to happen. Then the humans on the command deck felt something strange. Warmth spread through their minds. Images flickered behind their eyes. Memories that were not their own but felt completely real. A Kathrani warrior remembered his first battle. The fear in his hearts. The pride when he survived. The face of the enemy he had spared. An Allery child remembered learning to shape light. The joy of creation. The wonder of making something beautiful from nothing. A Morvathi elder remembered planting a seed on a barren world. Watching it grow over centuries. Seeing the forest it became before he left. The memories poured through the network. Not just memories of triumph, but memories of failure, of loss, of grief, of moments when hope seemed impossible but came anyway. Marcus closed his eyes and shared his own memories. The cold cell, the endless nights, the moment he finally found peace. He felt others receiving those memories, understanding them, feeling them as their own. Fatima shared memories of war, of crouching behind walls while bullets flew overhead, of holding a dying friend and promising to remember her name, of standing up again after every loss, because giving up was not an option. Aina shared something different. She shared moments of connection. A stranger helping her mother carry groceries. A police officer who chose words instead of violence. A gunman she had talked into surrendering, crying in her arms because someone had finally listened to him. The Voidborn reached the station's perimeter. Its darkness began to spread, reaching for the communication arrays as it always did. The arrays went dark. The physical network collapsed, but the connection did not die. Something had changed. The memories shared through the network had created bonds that did not need machines. The 3 million souls on the station and the fleet were linked now in a way that had no physical form. They felt each other's presence like warmth on a cold night. The Voidborn pushed deeper. It consumed ships at the edge of the fleet. It swallowed them whole, leaving empty shells drifting in space. But the crews did not die alone. Their comrades felt them go, felt their courage, felt their love, and remembered them. The Voidborn shuddered. It was a small movement, barely visible on the displays. But the ancient seer saw it. Her eyes went wide. "It felt that," she whispered. "It felt them remember." Yara understood. "Everyone," she called out across what remained of the network. "Remember them. Every ship that falls, remember them. Hold on to them. Do not let them go." More ships fell. The darkness consumed them one by one. Each loss was felt throughout the fleet. Each loss was answered with memory, with grief, with love that refused to fade. The Voidborn slowed. Its movement became uncertain. It reached for the station, then pulled back. Reached again, then stopped. Something was wrong. Something was different. Aina stepped forward until she stood at the very edge of the command deck, as close to the viewing windows as possible. The darkness was just outside now, pressing against the glass. She could feel its cold even through the walls. "You are hungry," she said softly. "You have always been hungry. But you do not understand what you are eating." The darkness pressed closer. "You consume light. You consume life. You think that makes you powerful. But every light you swallow becomes part of you. Every life you take, you carry with you. And those lights, those lives, they remember each other. Even inside you." The windows cracked. Cold began seeping through. "You are not empty. You are full. Full of everyone you have ever consumed. And they are waking up." The Voidborn screamed. It was not a sound that ears could hear. It was a feeling, a vibration that shook the station to its foundations. The darkness thrashed wildly, no longer controlled, no longer focused. Inside the Voidborn, something was happening. The consumed civilizations, held in darkness for millennia, were stirring. The connection created by the humans, the web of memory and love, had reached even into that terrible emptiness. And it was spreading. Lights began appearing within the darkness. Small at first, then larger. The lights of 1,000,000,000 consumed souls, remembering who they were, remembering each other. The Voidborn fled. It pulled back from the station. It pulled back from the fleet. It retreated into the depths of space, still screaming that soundless scream. The lights within it grew brighter as it ran. On the command deck, the 12 humans stood in silence. They were exhausted. Some were crying. Others were laughing. The Allery High Luminary's light blazed brighter than it had in centuries. "What did you do?" she asked, her voice filled with wonder. Yara shook her head. "We reminded them. Everyone the Voidborn ever consumed. We reminded them they were not alone. Will it come back?" "Yes," Aina said quietly. "It will always come back. The darkness never truly dies. But now we know how to fight it. Not with weapons. Not with force. With memory. With connection. With the thing it fears most." The survivors began to cheer. The sound spread through the fleet, through the station, through every connected soul. It was not the sound of victory. It was the sound of hope. Marcus fell to his knees and prayed. He thanked God for this moment. He thanked his mother for teaching him to hope. He thanked the universe for giving him a second chance. Fatima sat down heavily in a chair. She was old and tired, but her eyes were shining. "Not bad," she said. "For a bunch of primitive humans." Jinsu was already taking notes. Already thinking about ways to strengthen the network, to make the connection permanent, to teach other civilizations what the humans had discovered. His mind never stopped working, and the youngest of them all, Aina, stood at the window and watched the darkness retreat into the stars. She did not smile. She knew this was not the end. It was barely the beginning, but it was enough. For now, it was enough. 1 year passed, then another, then many more. The galaxy slowly healed. Civilizations that had been scattered began to find each other again. They built new cities, new ships, new lives. But they built differently now. They built connections first, physical structures second. They learned the lesson the humans had taught them. The 12 humans became legends. Songs were sung about them in languages they could not understand. Statues were carved in their image on worlds they would never visit. Children were named after them across 1,000 civilizations. But the humans themselves did not change much. Yara returned to Earth for a time. She visited her children, now grown with families of their own. She told them stories about the stars that they did not entirely believe. Then she went back to space, because there was still work to do. There was always work to do. She organized the first galactic peacekeeping force. It was not an army. It was a network of listeners, mediators, and connectors. When conflicts arose, they did not send soldiers. They sent people who knew how to remind others of what they shared. Jinsu opened a school. He called it the Institute for Connection Studies. Scientists and philosophers from every race came to study there. They tried to understand what the humans had done during the Battle of the Last Light. They tried to turn it into formulas and theories. They failed mostly. Some things could not be reduced to equations, but they learned enough to help. They developed technologies that strengthened mental bonds without replacing them. They created methods for sharing memories safely across vast distances. Marcus became a counselor. He worked with survivors of the Voidborn's attacks, people who had lost everything and everyone they loved. He understood their pain because he had felt it himself. He sat with them in their darkness and reminded them that darkness was not forever. He also returned to prison, not as a prisoner, but as a visitor. He talked to men and women who had done terrible things. He told them about redemption, about second chances, about a universe that was bigger and stranger than they could imagine. Some of them listened. Some of them changed. Fatima went home to Jordan. She spent her remaining years surrounded by her grandchildren and great-grandchildren. She told them stories about aliens and darkness and a battle fought with memory instead of weapons. They thought she was making things up. She did not mind. She died peacefully in her sleep at the age of 91. The news spread across the galaxy within hours. On 100 worlds, beings who had never met her bowed their heads in respect. She had become a symbol of human strength, of the stubborn refusal to surrender that defined her species. Aina was the youngest, and she had the longest road ahead. She traveled constantly. She visited world after world, teaching what she knew. She talked to leaders and children, to scientists and artists. She told them the same thing everywhere she went. Connection is not a weapon, she would say. It is not a strategy. It is simply what we are. Living things are meant to reach toward each other. We are meant to share our burdens and our joys. When we forget that, we become weak. When we remember it, nothing can destroy us. The Voidborn did not disappear. It still lurked in the depths of space, nursing its wounds, waiting for another chance. But it was different now. The lights that had awakened inside it continued to grow. The consumed civilizations continued to remember each other. Someday, Aina knew, those lights might grow strong enough to destroy the Voidborn from within. Or perhaps they would transform it into something new. Something that was no longer hungry because it was no longer empty. That day was far away, but it was coming. The eldest seer lived long enough to see the galaxy change. She had existed for millions of years, watching civilizations rise and fall like flowers blooming and dying. She had seen so many endings. Now, for the first time, she saw a beginning. She called the humans to the Temple Eternal one last time. They came, 12 ordinary beings from an ordinary world, carrying with them the extraordinary thing they had given the galaxy. The prophecy has been fulfilled, she said. You came from a world of blue and green. You carried a fire that could not be extinguished. You taught us how to survive. Yara spoke for all of them. We did not teach you anything new. We just reminded you of something old, something your civilizations forgot as they grew powerful and ancient. And what was that? That life is short, that every moment matters, that the only thing worth building is connection, because everything else crumbles in the end. The seer nodded slowly. Her ancient eyes held tears. The Morvathi seeded your world 3 million years ago, she said. They abandoned you because you showed too much aggression, too much chaos. They thought you would destroy yourselves. They were almost right, Marcus said. We came close many times. But you did not. And now I understand why. She reached out a thin hand and touched Yara's face gently. You are not chaos. You are possibility. Every moment, you choose who you will be. You can choose destruction or you can choose connection. Your species makes that choice over and over, every day. And somehow you keep choosing to survive. The humans stood in silence. They were older now, most of them. Gray hair, wrinkled faces, tired bodies. But their eyes were still bright. They had seen things no human had ever seen. They had done things no human had ever done. And they were still standing. What happens now? Aina asked. The seer smiled. It was a strange expression on her ancient face. Now you go home. You live your lives. You remember what you have learned and teach it to others. And when the darkness comes again, as it always will, you will be ready. Will it be enough? It will have to be. That is all any of us can do. Remember, connect, hope. It sounds simple, but it is the hardest thing in the universe. The humans returned to Earth. They became old. They died, one by one, as all humans do. But they did not die alone. They died surrounded by family and friends, connected to the very end. And the galaxy remembered them. Stories spread from world to world. The tale of 12 ordinary beings who defeated an ancient evil not with weapons, but with something far more powerful. With memory, with love, with the simple, stubborn refusal to give up. Children on distant planets learned about Earth, the strange little world that had saved the galaxy. They learned about humans, the brief and chaotic species that had taught the universe something it had forgotten. And when those children looked up at the stars, they did not see emptiness. They saw connection. They saw possibility. They saw hope. Because that was what the humans had given them. Not victory over darkness. Darkness would always return. But the knowledge that light could return too. That connection could survive anything. That as long as one person remembered another with love, the Voidborn would never truly win. The prophecy had spoken of heroes. It had spoken of fire that could not be extinguished. The ancient races had expected warriors and weapons, technology and power. Instead, they got 12 ordinary humans who knew something extraordinary. That the greatest strength is not the ability to destroy. It is the ability to remember. It is the ability to connect. It is the ability to hope. And humans, for all their flaws, have never forgotten how to hope. The end.